So I'm going to throw it, since we've got Luke here, to something that I know he can talk about while we're on the New York Power Hour. And he's probably itching to talk about is hockey, because I know, at least, even if Peter and I don't hockey as much, I know Ash does too. So we've got the Rangers to work with here in terms of the Rangers. There's some news coming out on both ways. They fired their coach. They extended a GM that I've been told is not the most popular man going on here, right? And this Rangers coach firing happened after a year of the President's Trophy and a really, really strong performance, and they turn around and miss the playoffs completely. You know, they're not exactly looking like the Devils, where they're down 2-0 in their series, but they did miss the playoffs. So I'll give you a few minutes here to talk about the Rangers. What's on the top of your head when it comes to New York hockey?
Yeah, I think me wanting to talk hockey is definitely an overstatement, because I do not want to talk about the New York Rangers right now.
What about the Islanders?
No, I don't want to talk about. No, I don't think anyone wants to talk about the Islanders. No one wants to go out to Long Island.
Any fish sticks?
You know, I was talking to Ash before the show too, and you know, I'll make a confession here. I think I've watched one Rangers game since New Year's, and I was sitting at home. It was about 3 or 4 weeks ago. We're kind of on the fence on a playoff spot. They're playing the Devils. It's 0-0. I'm like, all right, I'll turn the game on. Turn the game on 2 minutes. They let up 2 goals. I'm like, yeah, I'm done. I'm done with this season. It's over. I've had enough of this team, and I don't know what it is. I can try and pinpoint what it is. They have a ton of talent, but the problem is that you move around so many players. You get rid of so many players that you impact the chemistry of the team. You know, I talked before about baseball being a team sport and one player not really making or breaking a team. And it's really the same. It's the same thing in NHL hockey. You can bring a superstar to a team, but if you don't have the right players around them, your team's not going to be successful. You know, the NBA is a little different. You can bring that superstar guy in. He can take over for a quarter and bring your team to victory. But the NHL, it's so effective to have good chemistry with your players. And what Chris Drury has been doing over the last few years is just saying, if you can't perform at the level that I need you to perform at, you're gone. And that's regardless of what you can contribute to the locker room. And you can see it in the coaching as well. I mean, you've gone through 3 coaches in the last 4 years. You know, David Quinn was kind of a sacrificial lamb. Was stuck with a team that was rebuilding, and the team wasn't really great. I think he's a phenomenal coach. I think he does a great job developing players. The U.S. actually recognizes him as a great coach. I know he was on the bench for the Four Nations, tournament. Gerard Gallant had his issues in the locker room, but he had a ton of success in Vegas. He had a ton of success in beforehand. And same thing with Peter Laviolette. I mean, one of the greatest U.S. coaches of all time, and he's fired after 2 seasons, and you don't make the playoffs. So I don't know if there's not enough patience from the front office here, and it can really impact what's going on in the locker room. And you can definitely see the strife, especially in the media now, with guys talking about being very tepid about Laviolette's firing. But there's hope for the team. I mean, there's a ton of talent there. Artemi Panarin is one of the best hockey players in the world right now. You have him for next year, and then he becomes a free agent again. You still have Mika Zibanejad. You still have Adam Fox, who's one of the best defensemen in the league. You have Igor Shesterkin signed till the end of days, and if he can get his head right, he's one of the top goaltenders in the league. They got to figure out the chemistry. And it starts with Chris Drury. And I'll give John credit again here. I was texting him earlier about the extension, and I'm like, for a guy who had shown so much leadership as a player, it's just so surprising that he just doesn't have a gauge for what the locker room needs to look like. And he texted me back, and he was like, I don't think he's actually shown good leadership throughout his time in the NHL. I mean, he was captain of the Rangers at one point. Never won a Stanley Cup. Never really had a ton of success when he was with the Sabres. I don't know if James Dolan is just not seeing that with Chris Drury, and just keeping him along for the ride. And I know a lot of Knicks fans have issues with James Dolan, but Rangers fans have not had issues with James Dolan, and I think the big difference there, and we could spend so much time talking about James Dolan, but I think the big difference is that he's always very hands off with the Rangers, and he just chokes the Knicks to death. But I'm glad the Knicks have finally gotten the front office together that they really need. You go back to the Jackson years of just, it's just funny being in New York and listening to New York media. I mean, the word sabotage is used when they talk about the Phil Jackson years with the Knicks, and that just speaks volumes of just how poorly the Knicks have been run. But it's glad to see that they've finally gotten the right mix there. I'm definitely happy to see the success that the Knicks are seeing.
Yeah, for me, as somebody that, I will admit my interests have waned between the Knicks and the Rangers, but I still love both of those teams. James Dolan is an absolute menace. I can't stand him. But going with the Rangers, I think you hit the nail on the head. Chris Drury's just kind of killed the chemistry. There were reports that came out that the entire locker room was really angry when they traded Gaudreau away. Maybe not a player that's going to light up on the score sheet, but the locker room really loved him. And they got rid of him. And, it's just really a shame, as somebody that, like I said, Wayne's the interest does wane. I still am a Rangers fan. It's like they have to do something quickly because it's really starting to, I feel like we're turning into Cowboys fans. We're talking about how great the Rangers are and all the success, but we don't have any. Haven't won since '94. It's some.
Hey, but you started the streak for America. The reason I say that is Canada has not won the Stanley Cup since '93.
Yeah.
So the Rangers started the cup streak for America. So thank you to the New York Rangers.
We're the most,
I wasn't alive to see it.
We're the most
funny about
team.
that.
What do you want? What do you want? Red, white, and blue.
No, but
baby.
about that 90s thing is really funny because I'll give you a factoid because I looked up some stuff because I needed to learn since I basically only hockey with the Leafs. So the Rangers are the fourth team to miss the playoffs this season after winning the President's Trophy. Right? Fourth team to, I'll talk about that one day when we're not on the New York Hour. But the fourth team to miss the playoffs the season after winning the President's Trophy. 14-15 Bruins, 07-08 Sabres, and the 92-93 Rangers. And you mentioned what just happened in 94. And so it's just one of those things where, like, as Luke is pointing out, there's some talent there, and they might be able to figure some interesting things out in that Rangers organization. At the end of the day, the guy was, 94, 59, and 11, it says. That's a pretty solid record. I do think that just objectively looking at that, you could have given that guy a little more leash when it comes to Laviolette. So it does seem more like a scapegoat firing, which we see a lot of in New York. We saw it a lot with Dolan with the Knicks. Somebody's got to go. Somebody's got to be fired. And sometimes it was the wrong guy. And we're lucky the Knicks were able to keep the right guys together now. But Dolan had a quick trigger on that kind of stuff, which you think sometimes is a good thing. But it can be problematic. I think it was a good point in talking about chemistry in the locker room there. You're 100% right.
Yeah, and I'll throw this out too. I think it's really been an epidemic in the NHL. I know Ash, you've seen it too. Teams are so quick to fire head coaches nowadays, and it's been a huge revolving door. So I'm not sure if it's just a symptomatic of James Dolan being James Dolan, or if it's a symptom of NHL, just the NHL just cycling through coaches real quick.
Yeah, and you mentioned Panarin only having one more year on his deal, so it'll be an interesting offseason to see if they engage him on an extension, because in the NHL you can't do it until you're 1 year away from free agency.
I'm hopeful they do it. I think it's one. I've heard analysts say it's one of the best free agent signings of all time. The guy has lived way beyond his contract, and the way the salary cap is increased. I mean, how much he makes is not even comparable to what he contributes to the team. So I'm hopeful they bring him back, and he's. I mean, again, we talk about locker room guys. I mean, he is a phenomenal guy in the locker room as well.
Yeah, and the saddest part to me about this year with the Rangers and the Islanders both being bad is the NHL is a better league when you have at least one of those teams doing well and competing. Just like when the NBA is always better when the Knicks are good. That always helps the league and the profile of the league. I think the same with the NHL, and particularly with the Rangers because of the mystique of the Garden, the Mecca. I mean, it's just a magical place, and I love to see the Rangers doing well there. But not only because of the league's prestige takes a hit when the Rangers are not good, but we would be remiss to mention that Sam Rosen in his final season was calling such a bad team this year. I know I've called him one of the best play-by-play announcers in all of sports, not just in the NHL. I think that he did a tremendous job, and to see him go out with such a poor team was a shame.
I agree. It actually makes me very sad. I watched a lot of Rangers games as a kid, and it's a power play goal. That always makes me smile. But I do like the guy that got to replace him, Kenny Albert. So I do think the trend of good Rangers announcers is going to continue.
Yeah. Now again, Kenny Albert's a familiar name in New York.
Yeah.
Ranger. I think he did the Rangers play-by-play on the radio. I would have preferred they went Don LaGreca, but that's just me.